Good evening, everyone, and a warm welcome to our webinar. My name is Fatma Shaukat, and I am a BS Public Health student at the University Institute of Public Health, the University of Lahore. I have the pleasure of being your moderator for today's most important session, which is brought to you by Public Health Awareness and Training Center and the University of Lahore. Today, we are here to discuss the extremely critical topic of drinking water under threat, water quality decline, and emerging antimicrobial resistance. It is a great honor for me to introduce our speaker, Dr. Iqra Hamid Khan. She is an assistant professor of epidemiology and public health and the head of research at the University Institute of Public Health, the University of Lahore. And she is a gold medalist of both her BS honors and MPhil in epidemiology and public health. And she also holds PhD in public health from Malaysia. So please join me to virtually welcome our speaker, Dr. Iqra Hamid Khan. Ma'am, it's over to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Fatma. Thank you so much. Thank you so much for inviting me as a speaker. And I want to extend my gratitude to the Public Health Awareness and Training Center for such impactful trainings and which are actually very inspiring for the communities. So, starting with the topic that we have today is actually a very hot topic that needs to be discussed. Drinking water under threat. From the name, it is very clear that what we are going to discuss, it's actually a thing which is required for the daily basis. And if it is under threat, or the water quality is declining, or there is antimicrobial resistance, what things that we can face, and what water disasters, because water disasters actually claim for millions of lives. Because if we talk about the floods actually swallow all the entire cities to that the nation starves. So talking about the toxic water contamination, how it spreads, as it is actually an invisible killer. So moving on, we'll talk about the global water crisis. The most important thing is that the water crisis refers to approximately 2.2 billion people around the world today. And if it is 8 billion of the population, then we can see that 1 in every 4 people are dealing with the dangerous or very harmful and fatal effects of the contaminated water. So, moving on, water, the essential resource for life, is under increasing threat, not just for the scarcity, but the decline in its quality poses serious health problems worldwide. In countries, especially, not only about Pakistan, but all the developing or underdeveloped countries, millions of people are actually exposed to unsafe drinking water on the daily basis. And the consequences are devastating. We will see the case studies ahead and we'll come to know okay, what things we are coming across, what issues related to the contamination we are coming across. This is actually the representation of 96% of the water that we have is the ocean water, that is of the salination. 3% of the water is in the frozen state, and rather only 1% of the water is in the drinking form that we can consume. And further, that water is also divided into two parts, either the surface water or the underground water. That means underground water, which is not accessible for everyone. So how it is an issue? This is very important slide that we on the daily basis come across that such news related to the water, but unfortunately we neglect those diseases, we neglect those issues, we neglect those highlights. The first thing that I received from WHO site was $260 billion is lost globally each year. Because of that, due to lack of basic water and sanitation. It actually represents the economic stability or because of this solution, that there is an urgent need for the sustainable solutions. The next we have, 1 in 4 people globally still lack access to the safe drinking water, and women and girls spend almost 200 million hours every day collecting the water. It actually represents a critical global inequality that demands urgent attention, even if you are living in the urbanized area. or you are living in a peripheral area, you might have noticed that the household ladies are sometimes busy in collecting the water, or sometimes if even you are living in a very, developed city, even then they have a duty that they have to switch on the pump, water supplies, the motors, in any way that the women are busy collecting the water, storing the safe, healthy water for the daily lives. Every 2 minutes, a child dies from a water or sanitation related diseases. That is actually a tragic reminder of the urgent need that we need to protect our future generations. 23% of the schools lack access to the basic water and sanitation. Then we have WASH. WASH is actually water and sanitation hygiene related deaths are from the diarrheal diseases. It is also a very important issue which highlights that there is inadequate drinking water. And since I already told you, it is not just the issue of Pakistan, it is the global water crisis. Why the world urgently needs water-wise solutions. Flooded, flooded. We are flooded with the water, yet still we are thirsty. Why? Because we do not have access to the safe drinking water. This is actually the statistics which tells us about the diarrheal diseases deaths, how much it is prevalent, even in the low middle income countries. And Pakistan stands in one of the low middle income country. This news I found very interesting. That unsafe water kills more people than disasters and conflicts. It is a statistics of 2020 by the selected resources that the natural disasters, which include the calamities, floods, glacier melting, flooding, that it kills almost 8,200 people. But unsafe drinking water causing waterborne diseases. So it is actually a staggering toll that has exceeded the fatalities from not only the natural disasters but also from the conflicts. We know how many conflicts are there globally, the issues. Then this is the situation of the globe, how much we are in the water stress. We are standing over here. And this actually tells us about that billions of people are living in these vulnerable areas, which are actually highlighted in red. These vast regions are experiencing the extreme water stress around the globe. So, moving on, the global water crisis. The challenge isn't just about the accessibility to the drinking water. If you have accessibility to the drinking water, even then, there is a chance that you are having a contaminated water with harmful not contamination, not only because of the chemicals, bacteria, and even the pharmaceuticals, which is creating a perfect breeding ground for the antimicrobial resistance. If we talk about the issues related to the water, global issues, water crisis, we have eutrophication, we have salination, we had climate action. We all can remember the water conflicts in the Michigan states. We all remember the water crisis of the Cape Town in 2017 and 18. And even if we go back into the history of epidemiology, there was a huge outbreak of cholera in River Thames of the London, which killed millions of people. So that thing was noticed, and now we want to see those things again with the passage of time. What kind of contamination is there in the drinking water? So there are so many issues related to the water. It is about the water conflicts, which is actually because of that reasons people are starving, people are thirsty because of the water. There is natural eutrophication. Algae blooms are being grown into the water, which reduces the composition of oxygen and it increase carbon dioxide oxide content in the water. Again, the water is not drinkable. And if you talk in terms of the contamination, sometimes we feel like that the glass of water we are consuming is actually transparent. It does not has a bad odor, so it is maybe permissible. It is maybe safe water. But today, we are actually going to see the status of the drinking water of Lahore. So, what kind of contamination is present in your transparent glass of water? It includes the microbial contamination. There could be chemical contamination, the nutrient contamination, as I talk about the eutrophication, that algae blooms grow in the water, but does not change the odor sometimes, or they does not change the color. Then there could be physical contamination, thermal pollution because of the radioactive elements, salt water contamination. We call it salination when there is flooding in the particular area. So the water of that area gets mixed and cause salination of the drinking water in the regular rivers and streams and everywhere. Then is the oil contamination because of the larger oil spills. And then we have wastewater contamination. Now, we are going to move towards very important studies that were conducted in either Lahore or the peripheries of Lahore about the water contamination. We have been neglecting that issue. But today, we will see what we have been drinking since so many years, or maybe even now. So, safe drinking water for all is the basic human right. And World Health Organization claims that 73% of the people have access to the safe drinking water. And if we talk about in terms of the Lahore, Lahore has the population of 14 million. I'm going to connect this point with the point I discussed earlier, that in the population of 8 billion people around the globe, 2 billion people are having contaminated water. Like 1 in every 4 person is having contaminated water. And if I particularly talk about our city, that is one of the major and developed city where you can see filter water plants in every street, in every area, in every union council. So what is the status of those 14 million people who are having that drinking water? This is actually the map of Lahore, and just now I will tell you what we are drinking, which is very important because access to the safe drinking water is our right, and it has been understood by the WHO and the government that we are having our fundamental basic right at the affordable range and in the range of 30 miles. Okay. Fatma, do we need to restart this session before it finishes? Because it's the remaining time is like just 4 minutes and 11 seconds on my screen.
Yes, please.
Do we need to restart this session or I should continue it?
Continue it.
Okay. So I request if the session if the Zoom link gets expired, I request you all to please rejoin the link. So I'll continue with the first important study. The study has been published in the National Library of Science, National Center of the Biotechnology Information. The topic was about the assessment of arsenic, fluoride, bacterial contamination and drinking water for the rural communities of Kasur. Basically, it's about the peripheries of Lahore and other districts in Punjab, Pakistan. So this is the abstract being published, and you would not be so much surprised initially. Out of 37 water sources which were tested, 97% were found unsafe. 97 is a huge number. And 3% of the sources were within the safe limits. And what was not safe in the drinking water, there was high concentration of arsenic, fluoride, and bacteria that was found. Almost 91% of arsenic, 91% of the samples have the arsenic that was exceeding WHO limits. Then if we talk about the fluoride content, 74% of the samples have exceeded the fluoride content. And the bacterial contamination, the bacteria, that was 77% sources of drinking water respectively. Okay. The next was drinking and irrigation quality of water ground and health risk assessment due to arsenic exposure in Sheikhupura district, Punjab. And what did it highlighted? What it revealed? The arsenic concentration map shows that 78% samples of Tehsil Sheikhupura, 83% Tehsil Virozwala, 98% samples of the Murid K, and 100% samples of Sharakpur exceeds the WHO limit of the arsenic content. Arsenic is actually carcinogenic risk, that it promotes the risk of cancer. We have been looking at the cancer survivors, cancer patients around us. Initially, there was only, I guess, one or two hospital of cancer in Punjab, but the number of hospitals are increasing just because the number of patients are increasing, and number of patients are increasing because the exposure somehow is increasing. And how the content of arsenic is increasing in the drinking water, it is actually the eutrophication or the mixing of the fertilizer blooms or the any of the pesticide sprays that when gets mixed, it has a carcinogenic risk analysis. The next we have is the study National Library of Medicine. It is about drinking water quality status and contamination in Pakistan. Now, this is an entire study of the Pakistan. This is a huge and dangerous statistics indeed, that only about 20% of the whole population of Pakistan has access to the safe drinking water. I request you all, if the link gets expired, we need to continue it, we need to rejoin it so that we can continue discussing the water contamination issues around the Punjab, I guess. So, about 20% of the whole population of Pakistan. Okay, so we were actually discussing about the case studies which have been published already in different journals and which tells us about 20% of the whole population of Pakistan has access to the safe drinking water. Does not have to have access, and 80% of the population is forced to use unsafe drinking water because of the scarcity or because of the natural calamities that we are facing somehow, or sometimes due to unforeseen contamination. And what type of contamination is there in the drinking water? First of all, very important, which has been reported, the sewerage, fecal contamination, which is extensively discharged in the drinking water. And this is the study not of the particularly Pakistan, not particularly of Lahore, but it is actually of the Pakistan, which comes under the low middle income countries. Then we have the contamination of the toxic chemicals that we were discussing, arsenic and fluoride. Industrial effluents, pesticides, and fertilizers. The chemical components that has been sprayed on the crops, which when get mixed with the drinking water into the streams because of the flooding or either ways, all that chemical of the fertilizer is mixed with the drinking water, which actually increases cardiogenic risk. Then, 80% of all diseases, waterborne diseases, are because of the contaminated water. And whereas it accounts for 33% of the deaths. Now, I just talked about a point at a particular time that we are forced to have drinking water sometimes. If somebody in your place is not forced to have contaminated water like this, then which is apparently looking okay, then what kind of water we are actually facing, water crisis. This is also a statistics which is showing us the national level content of the arsenic in the drinking water. So we see Punjab and as well as Sindh. The red color is actually highlighting the vulnerable provinces or the areas which have highest content of arsenic, which is approximately ranging from 70% to 100%. Like if you talk about your area, if you are living in Punjab or you are living in Sindh, like there are 70 to 100% of the chance that your drinking water has arsenic content in that. And why are we talking about the chemical contamination of arsenic? Long-term consumption of arsenic contaminated water can lead to the skin lesions and internal cancers. Then it definitely rises the risk for the cardiovascular diseases, neurotoxicity, and the developmental effects, especially in the children. And at one case study, we talked about the fluoride content. There is excessive fluoride intake and which can causes the dental skeletal fluorosis and characterized by the discoloration of the tooth and most importantly, weakening of the teeth and bones, which is also becoming one of the major issue in causing the bones problem like arthritis, osteoporosis, osteopenia, and various others. So it is one of the major contributor that if you are having excessive fluoride content in your drinking water. Then is a study published in the Lancet about the burden of diseases which are attributed to unsafe drinking water. So there is that it representing about 2.5% of the global deaths and 2.9% of the global disability adjusted life years. And the proportion of diarrhea because of the water and sanitation hygiene facilities is also increasing. And not only about the abdominal diarrheas or something like that, but it also increases the risk for the acute respiratory infections, which is also once again very common, and in nutrition and entire disease burden for soil-related disorders, issues. Then as in another study, impact of drinking water, sanitation and hand washing, and how it tells us that there is an that wash interventions are actually required, they are needed. These interventions were associated with lower risk of the diarrheal morbidity. That is very clear. We already have been through the slide where it was said that almost in every 25 seconds, one child in the world somewhere dies of the diarrhea. This is the statistics of World Health Organization. Now, another study published in scientific report, consider it has been published in scientific report how important this would be. Geospatial mapping of the microbial contamination and public health risk of Lahore's municipal water supply. So this is actually in the center is the map of Lahore, and it is highlighting various areas, Khwaja Said area and Mustafabad, and few areas were particularly studied in this geospatial analysis mapping, and they too have told us about how much is the risk of different bacteria are increasing. These red bars are identifying how much is the content of the bacteria or public health issues in the drinking water in these particular areas, in the Nanga Mandi, in the Khwaja Said area, in Khwaja Farid area. So I'm just ahead going to show the analysis of our study. Then is the assessment of arsenic, fluoride, bacteria, and other contaminants in the drinking water sources of the rural communities of the Kasur, which has actually told about the arsenic and fluoride content. We have discussed it. Okay, now, very important. This is actually a study that we conducted across all the union councils of the Lahore. Considering that we took the samples from filter water plants. We all have seen the filter water plants in different union councils, and where there are long queues outside the tube wells, outside the water source supply. So considering that it is the safest water supply which has been provided to us, we actually investigated the prevalence of the pathogenic bacteria that includes E. coli, number 1, Shigella, number 2, Salmonella, 3, Pseudomonas, 4, and Vibrio cholera, number 5. And then we saw their antimicrobial resistant patterns. And again, I would repeat that the samples were taken actually from the filter water sources, filter water plant sources. And before telling you the results, before breaking out the results, I would like to tell you E. coli is responsible for various diseases like urinary tract infection, neonatal meningitis. It is actually kind of an inflammation of the brain in the neonates, in the kids, in bacha party. So then is the hemolytic uremic syndrome and gastroenteritis, very common for diarrhea and such diseases. Then we investigated the prevalence of Shigella. It causes severe dehydration. Toxic megacolon, again, the disease associated with the abdominal system. Then reactive arthritis, though it is rare, but it is proven to be associated with the presence of Shigella in the bacteria, Shigella in the drinking water. Then bacillary dysentery. Then we investigated Salmonella enterica, which is responsible for causing paratyphoid fever, salmonellosis, Reiter syndrome, and septicemia, the infection of the blood actually. The fourth bacteria that we figured out in the drinking water is causing Pseudomonas aeruginosa, which is responsible for causing eyes infections, bones and joint infection, urinary tract infections, skin infections, and pneumonia again. And Vibrio cholera is most commonly associated with the disease we call cholera, gastroenteritis, sepsis, and pneumonia. So now consider how important these bacteria are and what is their content in the drinking water of Lahore. Okay, now this is actually the picture of E. coli in the drinking water of Lahore. And you see this area specifically. It is basically the areas of Sare Sultan, Gulshan Ravi, Guldish Town, Samnabad, PIA Society, EMA Society, Shapur Kanjra, Gadi Shao, Bhagwanpura, Gulberg 2, Gulberg 3, and Faisal Town. They are actually having the most growth colony unit in these areas for E. coli. And I think I don't need to repeat that what E. coli is responsible for causing. And the rest of the areas which have the content of the E. coli, but is not at that level. So this one union council is covering a lot of colonies, areas, and small societies. So considering if I am talking about Gadi Shao, so Gadi Shao is a huge area covering millions of houses. And if their water supply is contaminated with E. coli, then all those people living in the area of Gadi Shao can get gastroenteritis, they can get urinary tract infections. And we know that it is very common. Then this is another hemolytic strain of the E. coli, very harmful, very dangerous strain of the E. coli. So in this strain, we have been looking at E. coli O157 that was detected in almost 24% of our samples. You see this area, and then and this area. So this is actually again Samnabad, Iqra, Multan Road, Begumpura, Fatehgarh, Garishau, Jallomore, Dharampura, Miamir, Shadman, and like these areas, Chungi, Amar Sadhu, Gulberg 2, Gulberg 3, highly densely populated areas of Lahore. And again, I'm going to repeat that same thing. So hemolytic strain is if it is common, then it is causing so much devastations and impact on the human health. Then we have identified Pseudomonas aeruginosa. Pseudomonas aeruginosa, it is actually exhibiting growth in 38% samples. That means 14% of the Lahore Union Councils are polluted with Pseudomonas aeruginosa. And what these areas are included: tubergy, and like again, respiratory infections and gastroenteritis and UTIs are again common in these areas. It include Tubergy, Yatim Khana, Bhagwanpura, again Wabda Town, Riven, and PIA Society, College Road, and all these areas. And somewhere near as well, in the Behria Orchard area. Though it is a newly developed area, but even the samples are contaminated with that. And if you talk about the contamination, it is so high. So the next bacteria that we identified in the samples, in all the water samples, that was the salmonella. And we know salmonella is very notorious for causing typhoid fevers, and paratyphoid fevers. It is a very notorious gastrointestinal illness that is associated with the outbreaks. There have been outbreaks because of the Salmonella typhi. So this area, because we were actually expecting that the world or the world city or the slum areas would be contaminated, but not only those areas. There are so many developed areas like Railway Colony, Begumpura, Ward City, Gawal Mandi, Haloki, these areas. This is the site for um, this is the site that we are for Navabda Town, Valencia, UET, NFC, and then we could talk about the areas which include Haloki site. So you have to be very cautious if you are living in these areas. The purpose of telling you is that. The next we have is the Shigella flexneri. So we know that Shigella is responsible for causing dysentery, and Shiga toxin is actually related to the neurological illnesses related to the brain. That once, God forbidden, Shigella bacteria enters to the body, it affects the neurological cycle. It causes neurological illnesses, especially in the children, and that also causes, sometimes Shigella is also very notorious for causing kidney failures, acute kidney failures. On that, the healthy patients immediately or in a couple of days move towards the dialysis. I'm giving you a huge disclaimer about the Shigella. So again, where Shigella is common, you see the walled areas of Lahore, Sare Sultan and walled areas, Gawal Mandi side. And this is also very important. It includes the side of, the Gajju Mata, just before Kasur side, I'm sorry, Kasur side. And then, and this upper zone is about, if this is about um, this actually area, Vaga side, sorry, Vaga border side. Yes, this is about the Vaga border side. Then we have Gawal Mandi, Vaga border side, Iqra, Samnabad. This is highly just next to the Kent. You see this space. This is the Kent area. We were not given the permission to get like the data from the main Kent army area. So just next to that, we have Gulberg 3 and we have Gulberg 2, Gajumata, this region. So if they are having Shigella, that means the risk for the neurological illnesses are increasing, and God forbidden, again, acute kidney damages or acute kidney failures are very common. Now, a Vibrio cholera. This is very interesting. In what perspective, actually? Because Vibrio cholera is actually a World Health Organization. We all are familiar with this name. They give us a statement that only single laboratory confirmed positive case for Vibrio cholera is actually sufficient to break an outbreak, to break the news, to declare an outbreak. That if, because all we are sharing the single water source, if the water of Iqra is contaminated. That means all those thousands of houses who are getting the water source from Iqra, from that tube well, from that filter water plant, are definitely getting that contaminated water. Similarly, in case of the cholera, WHO says that only one laboratory confirmed case. अगर किसी का एक केस आता है for Vibrio cholera, it is sufficient to declare a cholera outbreak. And even if only one case is like identified. And this is the statement by WHO and CDC as well. So this again, walled city, very important. And then, this area, Jamia Ashrafia area, this is actually Amin Park, Saidpur, Railway Colony, Gawal Mandi, Jamia Ashrafia, Muslim Town, and Haloki, and the new blocks of near Shaukat Khanam are positive for Vibrio cholera. That means there should be an endemic outbreak. But unfortunately, we have restricted resources. We do not go undergo sampling any patient who is coming with abdominal pain, who is having the history of diarrhea. We actually begin treating the patient with the antibiotics instead of going for the culture. And once you start the antibiotic, Vibrio cholera test, you cannot perform the Vibrio cholera test, or you cannot perform the culture testing of the people who are representing in the OPD or emergency in the Gawal Mandi side area, because these things sometimes are obvious. We consider them the typhoid cases, mean presence of the salmonella or cholera. So we begin treating with the symptoms of the patient. So now we know how important it is. Actually, I have uploaded the link. If you would like to have that, you can email us also. I can share you the report of World Health Organization or CDC regarding what do they say about the cholera and how important it is to get ourselves safe. Now I would be concluding my results. So this is actually a bar chart which is telling us about the distribution of the bacterial isolates in different union councils of Lahore. So 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 on the x-axis are actually telling that only 78 samples out of the total union council samples that we have 274, only 28% of the samples have zero contamination. But there is likely that if the one union council we took one sample, there could be a possibility even in that union council, rest of the others filter were not safe. So there's also a recommendation or limitation of the study that we need to check all the filter water plant samples. Then if you talk about the one bacteria, 20% of the samples have the growth of any one bacteria. Then 12% of our total samples have the growth of two bacteria. 18% of the samples have the growth of three pathogens. And 9% of the bacteria have the growth of four pathogens. 5% have the growth of five pathogens, and 4% have the growth of six pathogens, which is actually telling us that like 18% of the water samples in Lahore have not only one, two, but have three possible bacteria. It is actually what we tested. Actually, we tested six bacteria, six pathogens. There are several other pathogens that need to be tested. So because of the financial constraints, we only check for the six pathogens. So 36% of the contamination with the multiple pathogens. And that means 72% of the Lahore is exposed to the pathogens in the drinking water. Now, this is the antimicrobial resistance of the pathogens that were isolated from the water sources. So we all know that as per the WHO and CDC, like 20% of the threshold, resistance threshold, is a 20% threshold that is recommended by that. And it is a critical cut off in the antibiotic stewardship and the public health to determine whether an antibiotic can still have the recommended or has a reliable treatment or for that or not. Like all those antibiotics जिनका bar chart is threshold line से नीचे खत्म हो रहा है, that means only that can be given for the treatment. बाकी जितनी इस line से ऊपर आ रही हैं, इनका high risk of treatment failure है. यानी कि if your patient is somehow getting ill, you cannot give penicillin because it has crossed the threshold of 20%. You cannot recommend penicillin. You cannot recommend fluoroquinolones. You cannot recommend rifampicin. You cannot recommend oxytetracycline because there is high risk for the treatment failure of all these diseases that we just have read in the previous slides. So it signifies basically the treatment failure. I won't talk so much about that. The next we have is actually, here I have written HPCIA with single star and CIA with double star. It tells us about highest priority critically important antibiotics, and CIA means critically important antibiotics. So these are the stars. These are actually the important antibiotics. Naledixic, it is also one of the highest priority critically important antibiotic that needs to be given, that is considered to be the first line of treatment in any of the waterborne diseases. So HPCIA and CIA, and this is actually a greater zone that we have achieved all the medications which are susceptible for the treatment failure in the patients. And this is as per the classification. And unfortunately, we see the naledixic acid, which is critically ineffective, and which is critical antibiotic, but very important. And I have mentioned it with their salt name. You can search for their trade name as well. When you go for the Novidage, we go for the Flagell. In fact, Flagell you see is a bit how recommended. But if Flagell is given in case of Salmonella, if Flagell is given in the case of like typhoid patients, urinary tract infections, abdominal like vibrio-cholera infections, there is a chance it might work or it might not work. So yellow means there is an intermediate zone. There is chance that either the antibiotic is going to work or not. Only the green areas are showing you, yes, this is still sensitive to that bacteria and can be given. But rather the rest of the antibiogram you see for the antibiotics, it is showing you actually a disclaimer that we are running out of the treatment. I can just pause that if you can see that. You see, if you search for the piperacillin, it is one of the penicillin, जो हमारी first drug of defense में आती है. And then you see imipenem. It is a very latest drug and which is usually given to the patients who are in the ICU, intensive care units. And even the patients of, if this medicine is not going to work in the patients of Salmonella typhi, that means what are they left with? Because you see this trend, Salmonella, enterica, typhoids, and paratyphoid fever are becoming so hazardous limit tak they are being resistant, which means that our children, the people who are getting typhoid and paratyphoid, what's next? The mortality. Okay, so I'm just about to wind up. The study revealed alarming bacteriological contamination and showed that 72% of the people are one or more life-threatening bacteria they are exposed with, and multiple drug-resistant bacteria that accounts for the serious threat against outbreaks in the filter water plants. And high levels of antimicrobial resistance, which you see the threshold हमने दिखाया था of the 20%, majority of the antibiotics have exceed that threshold. So antimicrobial resistant infections are provided to cause 10 million deaths annually. So the rise of the resistant, these superbugs and these resistant pathogens, it actually undo the efforts of the decades of the medical progress. Like it took medical sciences to promote, to progress. It took them for like 10 years, 20 years, 30 years to launch one medicine, to give us medicines. But unfortunately, these stronger pathogens are working against it, and they are just pushing us back to those decades, from those decades. Just imagine this. Imagine a world where we can no longer rely on the antibiotics to fight infections, and where contaminated water further weakens our defense system. We consume water to quench the thirst, but we feel like in the coming years or now, the water is actually weakening our defense mechanism, as it has a high content of the the superbugs, the bacteria which are resistant. So this is the reality we are moving towards if we don't address these issues now. So might be now I have understood that this topic was very basic to talk about, but how important, how harmful, how much we are exposed to these pathogens. So now a question would definitely be coming into your mind, from where this contamination is coming, like how pathogens are coming into the drinking water plants and we are exposed to these pathogens. These are very obvious contaminations. The industrial discharge. Okay, then we have either the commercial level industry or we have the small domestic level. People are preparing things from their home, but ultimately the microplastic is being discharged in the drinking water that get mixed off. Then agriculture runoff, I talked about the chemicals that are being sprayed in the water. It gets run into that agriculture runoff, and is a strong chemical which ultimately causes it. Then we have the natural resources. We have the flooding, which causes the salination of the drinking water. Then we have the mixage of the sewerage lines. One of the study that was published in the scientific report has already told us that there is the sewerage and the wastewater is actually responsible for all these contamination. Hospital effluents, because somehow all the basic health units, if you do not have the tertiary care hospitals, we have the basic health units, we have the rural health centers around us, which are actually causing this. Then eutrophication, the bloom algae blooms, which reduces the oxygen content in the drinking water and increases the content of carbon dioxide ultimately, and then it promotes the growth of the bacteria. Then pharmaceutical pollution, antimicrobial residue is one of the issue that when antibiotics gets mixed into the drinking water, it actually causes the resistance, AMR. Then corroding old pipelines, which we already have, and we know that. Oil spillovers are one of the reasons. And then we have the climate change. Climate change is also another huge topic that we can speak on it like for an hour and it will not get finished, like how water stress is being caused and all these things. So what we can do at our end, what is the recommendation, what is the take home message? Integrated and advanced filtration and disinfection technologies. You have ultraviolet LED disinfections, and we have small units for the RO plants. Yes, RO plants at the domestic level that can help us for um, being safe from these contamination. Then membrane filtration technologies, we have UF, NF, ultrafiltration and nanofiltration, which is also effective. Then the conventional filters, one-step, two-step filters. Point of use water treatment systems or increased chlorination of the drinking water. In that involves the devices basically which have the filters in that and that can remove the contamination at the domestic level. We need to implement microbial source tracking, genomic surveillance, and DNA based testing. So basically, the genomics help us track the sources of contamination, how we can see the agriculture runoff. This either it is coming from the sewerage lines, either it is coming from the industrial waste. So from the genomic testing, we can trace that and we can actually work on that particular area which is causing the contamination. Use of the bioremediation and phage therapy. Basically, bioremediation is the biofilters containing the beneficial bacteria, just like the normal flora of the skin. So the beneficial bacteria that can break down the contaminants, so it can prevent the pathogenic bacteria from proliferating into the drinking water. And then last we have is the periodic monitoring of the water sources and increase sampling frequency and detect the response that I already told you we had the limitation in our study that we did not tested every sample of the Lahore. That we should go for it, that we can test all the samples of the Lahore. And what at least you can do at our end for the chemical contamination, we can look for the small TDS meters which are available in different markets, and we can just get our water tested that we are drinking on the daily basis. Or we can get the culture microbial culture testing of the bacteria of the sample of the water samples of your houses. So only then you can have a very clear picture of what you are drinking. So think carefully before drinking the water. You are not just quenching your thirst, for it may hold more than you expect. It is not just you are being thirsty and you are drinking the water. Your thirst might involve a lot of bacteria, involving a lot of bacteria contamination, which has a hazard risk for your actually health. So we need to work on these things. Thank you so much. I would appreciate the questions if you have.
Thank you so much, ma'am, for such a deeply informative and insightful session. Now we will move to our QA session. And guys, if you have any question, please feel free to ask them. You can either unmute your mic to ask ma'am directly, or you can drop your question into the chat box. Ma'am, we have a question from Iqra. What are the basic or ground level precautions that we should adopt other than awareness for a common man, lower families?
Okay. For the common means, for people, you can give awareness And apart from awareness, this is important that you can like in awareness, so such being a public health professional, I would initially recommend you to have the awareness either in the form of the pictorials, tell the people that they can boil their water, even not don't to rely or trust the drinking water filter sources. But apart from awareness, I already told you, I recommend you that there are small meters, the TDS meter, total dissolved solvent, which can tell you about the chemical contamination, or you better rely on some of those water sources like we have, I don't want to name any brand, but they you get a small filter water plant at your home, so you can have the accessibility of safe drinking water. I hope this satisfies the answer to your question. Yes, Fatma, please. Yes, Fatma, do we have another question?
Okay. This is not a question, but it's a comment from Mayan Sai that in most places people are aware, but they don't have enough resources for it. Can you?
Okay, this is very important. Yes. If people do not have resources for safe drinking water, still we can play a very crucial role in that. This responsibility. How? Number one, avoid wasting the water. Keep your surroundings safe, because the dumping of the waste near the water sources, you see now there is a Saaf Punjab scheme, but before that you need to keep surroundings clean, because if you're preventing the littering, you are preventing dumping the waste near the water sources. Ultimately it can also reduce water contamination. You can use the safe storage practices to avoid the contamination. And if you see there is a water leakage, or if you see there is a smell, you need to report it to the local authorities. There is sometimes hesitancy and barrier that if okay, water is not safe, yes, you can report to the local authorities. You need to promote hygiene practices, the wash facilities introduced by CDC and WHO. We need to support the water conservation initiatives in the community. That one of the initiative strategy that was introduced in Punjab was people were not allowed it, or cannot wash their cars and the slopes outside the home, just to preserve the drinking water. We need to raise the awareness. We need to participate in the community for the cleanup drives, um, and we can actually, the minimum we can do is we can inform the local authorities to provide us with the better infrastructure. Because if you are remaining silent, that is also one of the uh, issue, because that is your crucial role as a responsible citizen, that you need to look for these things. I hope this also satisfied your question. Fan-
Okay. Okay, I think so. We should wrap up our session now as we have only 1 minute remaining. Thank you so much, Ma'am Iqra, for dedicating your time